Today's episode of Socially Democratic is presented to you by Dunn Street. Dunn Street is a progressive campaign agency that specialises in campaigning and community organising. We work with non-profit and community-based organisations, trade unions, progressive businesses and social democratic parties across the globe. Dunn Street develops community engagement and organising strategies to win campaigns both big and small, and we train engagement staff, volunteers and organisers in leadership and power building. And if you want to create change in your community in 2023, then hit us up at dunstreet.com.au. Today's episode is also brought to you by Morris Blackburn Lawyers. When you need support with a legal issue, it can feel daunting. And that's why for over 100 years, Morris Blackburn has been helping guide clients with their legal needs. They're here to help you when you need them the most, from workplace to medical injuries, class actions, occupational diseases, and wills and estates planning. As Australia's leading plaintiff law firm, they have the knowledge and the national network with the experience that you can count on. And to find out more, simply go to their website, morrisblackburn.com.au. And today's episode is brought to you by SwiftFox. Every moment in a campaign matters, so you need the tools that you can trust. Lists that are up-to-date, phone banks that can change minds, emails that drive donations, events that will energise the community both online and offline, and text blasts that distill your message perfectly. SwiftFox CRM is made for campaigners by campaigners. And to find out more, just go to their website, which is swiftfoxcrm.com, to win your next campaign.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Socially Democratic, your weekly centre-left politics and organising podcast that dives into the progressive campaigns and issues of the day and the people leading them from home and abroad. This week, Stephen is in Amsterdam hanging out at The Hague with Dutch activist for the PVDR and host of the upcoming ForgingLinks podcast, Ali Hashem, and councillor of the Hague Labour Party, Mikal Tseggai. Ali and Mikal join the show to chat about their political journeys and fill us in on the upcoming Dutch elections. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you like the show, be sure to give us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And when you're done listening to today's show, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Podchaser. For updates on all things socially democratic, please follow us on Dunn Street's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn.
Okay, we are taping this one on a Monday at the local government offices in The Hague, or Den Haag, which is the capital of the Netherlands. And the political capital. Yeah. That was always confusing for me as a kid, actually, because I used to love trying to remember capital cities of the world, and I used to get confused about Amsterdam and The Hague, about which was the capital. But we could talk about that later. Anyway, you can already hear some voices here. I'm joined by 2 Labour Party activists here in the Netherlands, or the PVDR as they're known locally, to talk about Dutch politics. They've got elections coming up in a couple of weeks' time. So I'm joined by, first of all, Ali Hashem, who is an activist and the host of the, what's the name of the podcast again?
So ForgingLinks.
ForgingLinks podcast. And Mikal Tseggai, who is a list candidate for the PVDR at the upcoming November elections and a current councillor, and we're actually in the council offices. These are some of the most impressive council offices I've ever been to in my entire life. Thank you for having us here. Welcome to both of you to Socially Democratic.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, this is also the most coziest episode I think I've ever done.
At some point you're going to say, in our lap.
Oh, I know. But it's great to be here. Mikal, to you first. Tell us a bit about your background and your story. Doing some research on you before I came here today, you have achieved so much in such a short period of time.
Thank you.
You're a published author. You've already been elected to local government. You're standing at the upcoming elections, the national elections, whilst trying to finish a master's degree. Whereas when I was your age, I couldn't get out of bed before 12 o'clock. So where does this motivation and drive come from?
To be honest, if I can, I also like to get out of bed after 12 o'clock, but it's not always possible.
Well, it's even more impressive. You've done all of that and you still,
No, but so obviously my name is Mikal, I'm 28 years old. And I'm trying to finish a master's degree right now, working on my thesis and running for office, so it's a bit intense. But I think it all comes down to motivation, and if you like what you're doing, it doesn't feel like too much. And sometimes I have a period of time where I feel like it's all too much, but most of the time that's because I don't like what I'm doing. So then I get, for example, long meetings at the city hall is not what gets me going. I like to go into the city, talk to people, visit people and organizations. That's what makes me happy. So
And what I want to go back to the start. Like, what are the values that define who you are? What's most important to you?
So I come from an Eritrean family, and many people in my family joined the struggle for independence when Eritrea was in a war with Ethiopia. And basically I was raised with the idea that you should stand for your ideals and your values, and at the end of the day even be prepared to die for your values and what you stand for. So that's a bit extreme, obviously. In the European context, it's not always necessary to sacrifice your life for politics. But I think that's why I became a very idealistic person, because of the way my parents raised me. And also because I still have family in Eritrea. I've been there multiple times, and to see the difference between my life and their lives, it has shaped me as a child, I think.
Right.
Yeah.
Can you think about specific moments in your childhood that did shape you and the values that have been important to you through your journey?
I think I would say when the far-right parties came to a rise in the Netherlands, that was very shaping for me, because then me and my parents started to face a lot more racism. And there was a certain point in Dutch politics where a Dutch Somali member of parliament got her passport taken away because there has been uproar about the things she said in her asylum procedure. And that was like, for me, it was like a very shaping moment, because I felt like if some people up there decide that I am not a Dutch citizen anymore, they can send me out of the country.
Yeah.
So that was very important for me to realize that it's important that the government doesn't discriminate people and doesn't exclude people, just so that everyone could be part of society. And
How old were you when that happened to that politician?
I think I was 10.
Right.
Yeah.
What do you remember about that time like?
I was afraid of the minister who did it to her, to the member of parliament, and she is now actually in the States, but the one who took away her passport is a colleague of mine now in the Hague City Council.
Right.
So that's a bit weird, to be honest, because I was a bit afraid of that woman when I was a kid. So it was very weird for me, I think, to realize that just because of the color of your skin and where your parents come from, people get to decide that you cannot be a Dutch citizen anymore.
Yeah.
And I think it's very important that the government looks to people or treats people equally, no matter the color of their skin or where they come from.
One thing that does always fascinate me is that when people are faced with challenges and want to overcome those challenges and make choices, there are lots of different choices that you can make to find a pathway towards change. Politics is one of them, but there's lots of other different things you can do. When was the moment that you thought, politics, and in particular, Labour Party politics, is an avenue where that you want to be involved in and that you can create change?
So I came to The Hague when I was 18, 10 years ago, to go to university. But I come from a background and a family where it's not normal to go to university. My sister actually graduated this summer. We had her graduation party this weekend, and she was the first in my family to graduate from university. So when I started university, I was like, I want to do something that makes sure that other people get equal chances in society as well. And I think in the Netherlands, a lot of children face not discrimination, but just inequality. Mm-hmm. Like the system is not fair. If your parents don't have a high income or have a migrant background, you're treated differently by the system than when you're a white, rich kid living in the right neighborhood. And that's something that really bothered me and that I wanted to change. So when I came to The Hague, I became a member of the Labour Party. I became active so that I also got to know, because also social, to be active at a political party, you get to know people, make friends.
Yeah.
So it was like two birds with one stone for me.
Yeah.
And then I became a board member at the local PvdA board, and then they asked me to run for office. And I decided, yeah, why not? I was very young, so...
How old are we?
I was 22.
Jeez.
So sometimes when I think about it, I'm like, that was crazy. But I also thought, like, what does it matter that I'm 22? Everyone above the age of 18 has the right to run for office.
Yeah.
So why wouldn't I? That's what I thought. So I did it anyways, and it worked out great. Could have gone wrong as well, but it worked out very well. And I really like it.
Ali, you've I know that you live in the Netherlands now, but I do detect a London accent. I've watched at least 10 seasons of The Bill, so I can spot a London accent when I hear one. Something tells me that your story has a journey of migration in it. Tell us a bit about how you came to be doing the work that you're doing now.
Yeah, so I've been in the Netherlands for about 5 years now. I previously, of course, I'm from London, from Hammersmith and Fulham. I grew up in London. My parents are originally Iraqi, and I was born actually in Syria. So the journey starts way before even my birth. And at some point, my dad was very politically active, which was the reason why he was in Syria in the first place. After leaving Iraq as a young man.
Mm-hmm.
He studied university in Syria and then got married to my mother, who was also from their neighborhood. And then at some point, the Syrian intelligence didn't like what he was doing. They started hunting him down. And then we went on a long journey to eventually be in the UK when I was basically about 2 years old or something. Spent most of my life in London. And I think I relate to how you're saying, like, your family has this, resistance fighters, freedom fighters. My dad considers himself in the same realm, and basically I used to spend my Saturdays, instead of watching cartoons and hanging out with other kids or playing football, he used to take me to Trafalgar Square, where we would, the main square in London, where we would collect signatures against Saddam Hussein, which of course he opposed. That journey was like for 10 years or so. We'd collected more than 1 million or so signatures.
Wow.
Unfortunately, like, what's sad is that movement, because there was no like social media at the time. It's not very well recorded, but basically most of the people within the resistance against Saddam Hussein are aware of that happening. My mother used to cook chickpea soup. And I'd be the one who had to distribute that, and it was a nice icebreaker or bone breaker. With talking to people on the streets to try and get them. So very in touch with kind of like politics embedded into it. And then at some point I realized I wanted to do something away from that kind of politics, especially after the invasion of Iraq. I realized that resistance was over. Half the people went back and started becoming part of the government. Half the people just stayed back in the UK. For myself, I just realized, like, it was insincere to do anything in Iraq because I couldn't relate as such. And that motivated me to, of course, locally we had housing issues. I started campaigning on housing, and then that grew into joining the Labour Party, standing in local elections. I was a councillor, deputy mayor in Hammersmith and Fulham. And then towards the end of my term, I did 4 years there. I transitioned to the Netherlands, mainly because my partner is Dutch. She's ethnically Iraqi as well. But my partner basically said it was very difficult for us to continue living in the UK. We had a kid by then. The pollution, the cost of living. This is way before, it was during austerity under the Tory government, but even before, the crisis the cost of living crisis that the UK faces now. So it was hard then, and it's much harder now.
Yeah. I want to go back a couple of steps there. I'm interested about the story about your father and the work he was doing in Trafalgar Square. Have you read Nick Cohen's book, What's Left?
No.
Because I feel like the opening chapters talk about the work that your father did and people within the Iraqi community that were living in the UK fighting against the Ba'athist Party. You need to read that book.
I will. And you know what? My parents did not have the habit of waking up in the morning and opening the curtains. When I moved to the Netherlands, everyone's just like transparent. Like you'd see people's curtains are never closed, and that for me was like psychologically a transition, one of the cultural transitions. And so one of the things is that I grew up with the mentality of, you're being observed, you're being hunted down, and I thought it was like, nah, this can't be real, until after 2003, once the Ba'athist regime did fall.
Yeah.
It turned out one of the people in the protest every Saturday was actually an agent reporting on the activities.
That's crazy.
From the Ba'athist Party.
From the Ba'athist Party.
Nuts.
Somebody who, nicest guy ever, like type situation.
Yeah, but yeah.
He's a spy.
He was a spook.
That's crazy.
We'll have to pick up that over a beer afterwards. But okay, so you covered up a whole bunch of things there. You talked about housing.
Yes.
Was that the thing that sort of sent you off into this journey into Labour politics or party politics in general?
Yeah. So I was part of the Tenants and Residents Association, and basically the Tories. We lived in a council estate. And the Tories basically flogged it off once they got into power in, I believe it was 2008 or so. They flogged it off.
At local government level?
Local government. Yeah. They basically sold a plot of land that probably worth $1 billion or so, 1.2 billion maybe at best, was sold off for like 100 million, which is basically like 10% of the price that it should go for. Mm. And the reason is they're just like, just get rid of this, gentrify it. Let's bring in luxury housing under the premise that, we're going to rehouse you. That never really works out for most people once the transition starts happening. So we campaigned on that. The local Labour Party was basically like, hosting that movement, helping, supporting from a distance. And then when I joined in, we basically, once we didn't expect to win government in 2014, we won local government. That was when I became a councillor then.
Yep.
Basically, we stopped that deal happening.
Yep.
And we reversed it. And that was one of the achievements of when you say governments can't, politicians don't do anything, can't do anything. This was a campaign where we identified what we needed to do. Once we got into power, we just made it happen.
Yeah, right.
And so I'm very proud of the team there. They're still in power at the moment. Most of the people are left behind the announcement.
Fantastic. A question for both of you, and I want to talk about partly sort of the experiences that I've had back in Australia. The Australian Labor Party's voting base is largely, not the majority, but a large element of our voting base are post-war, as in post-Second World War, migrants from Europe that came to Australia, and now, they vote Labor, their children vote Labor. And I think you can probably say the same about the Labor Party in the UK to a certain degree. I'll ask you for your thoughts about that in terms of the Dutch Party later. But if you look at like the voting base of the Democratic Party in the United States, it's like, they say that the epicenter, the power center of the voting base of the Democrats is African American voters, in particular African American women. And I think about my own childhood. I'm a son of migrants, and those kitchen table conversations as a kid with my parents saying, we came to this country, we came to Australia to raise a family and have a better life, but don't you take that for granted. And if you do want to create change, then you need to get off your ass and do things, right? And I just wonder about, does the migrant story mean it's easier to see a pathway to create change through the Labor Party? What attracts us to do this work, or is it harder? Like, I want to get your thoughts first of all, Mikal. Do you think was it harder for you to get in there, or was it, like?
I actually think both, because on one side you have a very clear drive, a very clear motivation of what drives you to work in politics, but on the other side, I was the only black city councillor for a while. Now since the last elections, I'm not anymore, happily. But if I go into parliament, I might be the only black woman as well. That comes with a lot of death threats, a lot of negativity, a lot of racism, sexism. So that can make it harder as well. And also, people have to get used that there is a black woman in the system that they are working in, because sometimes you want to make a point about racism or something that has to do with migration or refugees, and then it's like, oh yeah, she's only saying that because it's important to her community, or she's only trying to serve her own community. Of course I'm trying to serve my community, because that's what we all try to do in a city council. It's not because I'm black that I'm trying to serve a community. It's because I am someone who is representing people, and I hope every one of my colleagues does the same thing. But because you have a certain color and a certain ethnicity, people look at it differently, if you understand what I mean. So I think both. Sometimes it makes it easier, sometimes it makes it more difficult.
Ali?
I struggled in the UK. I struggled with being boxed into, because I come from a Muslim upbringing, I come from ethnic minority, yada yada yada, all those identities. I did struggle to have the freedom to create my own identity as such. When I moved to the Netherlands, I had almost like a clear platform. I was happily a foreigner, let's just say. I know I didn't grow up here, I'm not a native speaker, I just speak Dutch, terribly so.
No, you speak Dutch very well.
It's because you're kind. I almost embraced that identity of an outsider, because here I'm naturally an outsider. Whereas in the UK, I did try really hard to fit in, but then I realized I was being boxed into what was necessary and needed. Now that I'm here, I'm able to embrace that. But the problem also is that sometimes, how relatable am I to the average Dutch person? That is a struggle that some people in the party, hesitate to bring me forwards into. That's why I'm trying to forge a wider audience of service. The reason why I joined the Labour Party is not the same reason I joined the Labour Party in the UK. The reason why I joined the Labour Party in the Netherlands was because that rich history of the socialist movement in the Netherlands, I could relate to much more than any other party. Much more than the Liberal, the Zesester, or the Tories, or you have a multitude of parties here. In your council, you have 15
in the city
and
council.
Probably on national level there's 50.
That's nuts.
So you can join a wide array. I was invited to join a Muslim background party, inspired by, in the same way the Christian Democratic Party was more like the Muslim Democratic Party, or come and join the very local regional party where I live in Schiedam, or you can do that, or join the Green Party or such. But for me, it was, where would I want to feel as a home? Where would I want to, if looking back, success or not success on a parliamentary campaigning level, where would I relate to? Where do I feel comfortable in terms of my values? It was liberating to be able to pick based on my values, even though, I would say coincidentally it's the Labour Party, but it felt different to picking the Labour Party in the UK, where you had, two-party system, and you're kind of locked into that. You either want to be in the opposition, or if you want to fight for power. So here it was far more liberating. Felt like I was free to choose my path much more.
That's really interesting. I hadn't thought of it that way. Let's talk about contemporary politics. We've got an election in less than 6 weeks. It's on November the 22nd, for those out there wondering. Mikal, to you, I want to get a sense from you about what are the top issues that you think will dominate the conversation for voters leading up to the election.
I think definitely cost of living. It's not as bad as in the UK, but we also have a cost of living crisis. And I would also say housing. Everything that has to do with environmental issues, and lastly I would say migration and the whole identity discussion.
That's amazing, because I'm going to ask you questions on all of those things.
Yeah, well,
that worked out quite well, didn't it?
You're welcome.
Well, can we start with housing? Because I know that you've got a background in housing and urban development and planning. Housing in Australia is a massive issue for folks, right? People who are trying to get into the housing market, that is to buy a home, people who are renters, the queues when a property goes on the market to rent on a Saturday afternoon, down the street. And folks that own homes, obviously, it's getting more and more expensive because our interest rates are going through the roof. So there's all these challenges Australians are facing. I know our listeners would be very interested to get a sense about what are the challenges that Dutch people are facing right now in terms of housing.
I think literally the same as in Australia. Like, we have social housing, but you have to wait 10 years to get into that.
Is that
government housing?
We
call it social housing, but it's government housing.
But it's not purely government because it's a housing association.
Yeah, but it's paid for by the government. So that's why we call it social housing. But if you only can get into that if you have a certain income, underneath a certain income. But you have to wait 10 plus years to get government housing. So people have to go on the market either to rent or to buy. Renting is super expensive and super crowded as well. I had a friend of mine who wanted to register for an apartment, a new built apartment in Amsterdam. There were 30,000 people who wanted to live in that building. And he got into it. He said, I felt like I won the lottery. And I said, you did, literally, because there were so many people.
Yeah, right.
And when you want to buy, we have the same issue with interest rates. We also have the issue that people just buy houses for fun. Like rich people, they buy houses for fun. They renovate them and then they sell them again for extra money, or they rent them out for extra money. So we have the same issues, I think, as other European countries, but also as other countries overseas.
And so how is that, I mean, what is happening in Dutch politics right now in which you can foresee pathways to solutions to dealing with this, and how is the Labour Party trying to insert themselves into this debate?
So we try to focus on building affordable houses. So locally, for example, we try to make sure that every new housing project consists at least of 50% government housing, so that we get more quantity on that market as well. It's not a market, but like So and when it comes to the free range renting market, we try to maximize the prices. That we are working on on legislation for that.
And as a candidate in the election, going out there and talking to folks in your constituency, what kind of response are you getting from voters about what Labor is saying on this particular issue?
Well, people tend to say, of course, obviously the Netherlands is a small country, so people tend to say the Netherlands is full. Stop letting in migrants because we can't take care of them. I have to wait 10 years for a house, and they get a house immediately. It's not true, but that's what people think. So I try to shift the conversation away from migrants to the policy of the last few years that has been very much away from the government housing. Like the government was even selling social housing instead of building new affordable housing. So I try to shift that conversation away and just trying to talk about what we want to do instead of blaming it all on migrants, because I don't think that's fair. Only 3% of government housing in The Hague, for example, is given to refugees, not even like economical migrants, but the refugees. So it's not fair to blame them, I think.
Yeah, right. You mentioned the cost of living.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's a war going on in Europe, which sounds completely insane to say in 2023.
It does. Yeah.
What's been the main drivers that have increased the cost for folks that want to live here in the Netherlands?
It's very easy to say it's all because of the war, but that's not true, because it's also about what the government decides to do and not to do. So, for example, in Germany, our neighbors, the prices are much lower. People who live close to the border with Germany, they go shop there because it's just everything is cheaper there, gas, groceries, etc. But I also think that the minimum wages in the Netherlands are way too low. So we are now advocating to make that increase so that people who work don't have to go to the food bank, because that's what's happening now. Almost 1 million people in the Netherlands live in poverty, and I don't think that's normal in a country as the Netherlands.
Yeah, right.
Because we are a rich country, obviously.
Ali, do you want to jump in on that?
Well, what I've literally seen with regards to policy making is we can have wonderful ideas about building social housing, putting these plans together, but when you have a coalition, like inevitably in the Netherlands you have to go into a coalition, and that I believe is resulted in a barrier to be able to genuinely implement some of the ideas that we have in terms of putting more social housing or basic government housing, putting in place the financing for that, putting in place a systematic change to the way things are done in the construction market, in the way that we implement the allocation of that. So what you find is that it's fine that we advocate for it and people know, but how much are we able to make that change and make that difference? That's where I doubt it. And that's where people are hesitant, in my opinion, to vote for us as a front line to make that change, because they know that if we want to make any change, we need to be, we're in a corner where anything we really want to do has become so radical as a concept. You know, if you look at, when I was discussing with a gentleman on the street the other day, and you were there as well, where he's talking about, the impact of the Ukraine war, all parties are the same because they're pro-arming Ukraine. Completely, this person looked homeless.
Mm-hmm.
And that to me is the contrast, is that we've been distracted by geopolitical ideas, we've been distracted by all these things that are completely out of our control, and then locally things that are in our control, we feel hopeless to make the change.
Mm-hmm.
And when you come and you say, I want to build social housing, the same people that need the social housing will tell you, immigrants are taking those social housing. Here's the tough part. Most likely it's the same person who also works in the construction industry and finding ways to decrease costs of construction and maximize profits. And what you realize is that most of the money, where it comes to the margins, are coming from the companies and not from the material cost. They're maximizing their profit because the system allows it to happen.
Yeah.
Exactly.
The system enables this, and basically we're in a place where even if the government wants to go into the market and try to challenge that, we're inevitably going to be increasing prices even more. So I think what we're finding is that it's becoming tougher and tougher to advocate for the leftist ideas because of the system change that needs to happen. And then we just look like a bunch of radicals, a bunch of loonies sometimes.
But I think
just proposing reasonable things that, 60 years ago were what built the Netherlands, the UK, Europe.
Mm-hmm.
Ideas that genuinely built these economies.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, I wanted to say, I think that we are right now in a very transitional political time in the Netherlands, because Mark Rutte, our Prime Minister, he will step down. Obviously, the Labour Party is starting a coalition with the Greens. So I really have good hope for this election. And I feel like it's the most exciting election in maybe 15 years. So, yeah.
Let's take a quick break to talk about SwiftFox. Every moment on a campaign matters. You need the tools that you can trust. Lists that are up to date, absolutely. Phone banks that can change minds. Emails that drive donations, and events that will energise the community online and offline. And text blasts that distill your message perfectly. SwiftFox CRM is made for campaigners by campaigners. And to find out more, go to swiftfoxcrm.com to win your next campaign. Okay, let's get back to the show.
We'll see how it goes.
It's adding on that. It's interesting. We've had a whole round of elections back home in Australia over the last sort of 18 months, both at a state level and at a federal level, national level. And cost of living was the number one issue when voters were surveyed that would impact on who they were going to vote for. And remember, in Australia, it's compulsory voting, so we don't do turnout. It's just persuasion only, right? Just people are going to go to the polls, so let's just persuade them. Now, historically, in the 70s and 80s and 90s and early 2000s, if you were going to run a campaign and the central issue was cost of living, that is normally considered to be a conservative frame, as in that is good terrain for them. If they're going to be talking about cost of living, we would be worried as a left-wing party. Amazingly, the Conservatives were in government at a national level, and cost of living if you surveyed voters and they said, who do you think is best to handle the cost of living? Over time, voters started to say, well, I think the Labor Party would be best to handle it. And that shocked me, right? And then even at state elections where we were the incumbent party in government, the same results were coming back through. People saying, I think Labor is the best party to handle this issue. The things that I thought and I wondered, well, how did that happen? And I thought it was interesting to see how the Labor Party took policies to the election where they could, one, frame up the Conservatives to say, you're the reason why we've got high cost of living, you're out of touch and you don't understand what ordinary Australian voters are going through, and you're not the people that will be able to handle it. And here's some of the ideas that we're going to take to the election, like trying to put better wages in the back pocket of Australian workers, like the government inserting itself into the market and actually working out where can they intervene to try and reduce the costs, like more investment into TAFE courses, which is like not university, once you finish high school, not go to university, but do skills with your hands, trades. Vocational work. So if you want to be a nurse, we'll pay for it. If you want to take up certain skills, trades, we'll pay for it. So therefore, there's other ways we can help you not have to pay for these sort of things. If you want to put solar panels on your roofs, we'll pay for it. So we're trying to bring down your energy bills. So we tried to work out where were the areas where voters were actually getting impacted directly, as opposed to doing long-term policy adjustment that you're not going to feel the effects of it until 5-10 years. People can't wait that long, right? No. And I'm interested to get a sense of what are we hearing from the Labor Party here in the Netherlands in terms of policies to address this central issue of the cost of living.
I think
because you mentioned the minimum wage before, right? There's one. What else are we doing?
I think when it comes to sustainability and environmental issues, we are also trying to communicate very clearly to people that it's not about drinking oat milk. It's about indeed putting solar panels on your roof so that your energy bills lowers and that you also reduce your energy use. So that's two, I think. Yeah. And also when it comes to inflation, I think it's very important for the government to insert itself in the market, because we now have to do with companies that hire the price just because they can, and people can't pay for their food anymore, and the companies just keep doing it because why the hell not? No one stops them, and sometimes they don't even pay their taxes, and sometimes they get an extra subsidy from the government, and etc. So all of this also has to stop, because it makes the people it makes the people uncertain of social security and food security, even in a country as the Netherlands. And
do you think that, say, middle class voters, which I assume in a country like the Netherlands, that's where the majority, that's probably where elections are won and lost, right? Are they starting to look at government and think, hang on a minute, what's going on here? Why are we struggling to pay for our weekly food bill while these fat cats in Amsterdam or in The Hague are earning, big corporate dollars and paying themselves these bonuses? Because I've noticed in Australia that middle class Australians are starting to wake up and go, hang on a minute, this isn't right.
I think in the Netherlands we have the tendency to take things seriously when they happen to the middle class. So, for example, the housing crisis wasn't considered a crisis before it happened to middle class people, and now we have the same thing going on with the cost of living crisis. And when it comes to debt, you now see, let's say a salary of €2,500 after taxes would be in the Netherlands would be more than enough to live a comfortable life before this crisis. Now you can't even save if that's your salary. So people start to even if they're middle class, they start to struggle, and that's why they look at the government differently now, because normally they would say, well, the government, I don't really need them, why would I bother, I don't care. But now they see that we need a change, and that's what makes me hopeful.
There is a certain framing. People, the middle class, tend to vote for as much stability as possible.
Exactly.
So keep the status quo going as long as possible. That's why Rutte has been so successful at remaining in power, because he promises to just keep things going as they are. And now what you're finding is there's this divergence. Stability is no longer working, but then on the other side, the right keeps framing the left, Green Party, Labour Party, as radical, they're coming in and they're going to make it worse. Because why worse? Because they're saying, if you put in place the Green Deal that's coming from Europe, if you implement all those measures, it will increase the costs, and rather than decrease the cost in the short run.
Mm-hmm.
If you intervene in the housing market, you will increase the costs of the material to make construction, and contracts will go up, and labor will have basically the constructor people, the builders, are going to cost more because they have more projects. So then your average middle class person who needs somebody to come and build an extension will now cost double, and that's happened in the past. And then so that's two main things that we are advocating for, that now the middle class is saying, oh, I'm not sure about that.
Mm-hmm.
Like these will make me worse off. And then you've got other measures like minimum wage. If some of the middle class dabble in entrepreneurial activities, will also say, wait, that means I have to pay out for the cleaner, for the mechanic, for the other people. If I'm running a small business, I'm going to have to fork out more money, and that's going to cost me more. So there is this situation that we find ourselves in, where the stability they know isn't working, so they're not they probably will try to look for alternatives to the centre right, and then the left is telling them they're hesitant about it. So I think that's where we need to become more assuring, to say, look, what we want is just to keep things steadily growing towards a different direction.
Yep.
But who's going to try and disrupt that is, of course, the right, who control aspects of the media, or control aspects of the narrative, will try and keep framing us as radical, as oh, this goes too far, this will cost us. And I think that insincerity on both sides, insincerity from our sides to admit that some of the measures that we want to put in place are costly and will cost, and we do need to increase taxation, we do need to intervene, and there may be unforeseen consequences. So we need to be more honest about what we're going forwards with. And the right need to understand that the more they bash this narrative, the more they bash the way we're doing things, they're going to corner themselves, because guess what? It's going to make people either not vote or vote really extremely, either left or right.
Yeah.
And that won't result in a stable government. Then we'll have years of unstable governments. Last government negotiations took almost a year to happen.
Yeah.
And this time it might,
Even be
Labour
longer.
win
Yeah.
or Centre of Everyday win. We might still have 2 years of negotiations.
Yeah.
And Rutte, this whole time, the caretaker government of Rutte stays in power.
For folks at home, the electoral system here in the Netherlands is basically similar to what they have in New Zealand and Scotland, where they have this national list. Mikal, you mentioned before about environmentalism and climate change. We as Australians look to Europeans, particularly Western European nations, with envy in terms of the amount of resources that you've allocated to investing in renewables. I mean, even just anecdotally, catching the train around this beautiful country of yours, seeing all these windmills everywhere, and I mean the new ones, not the old ones.
Yeah.
To be clear, it just demonstrates the amount of time and energy that's been put into transitioning towards more renewable energies. I know you've still got plenty of power plants lying around the place as well. In Australia, climate change has been really politicised, and for a long time I would say it would be the third rail of Australian politics. Like Labor just did not want to touch it, because the Conservatives would say that look, they're going to bring back taxes to pay for all these kind of things. So and we need to continue to invest in brown coal and all that kind of stuff. What is the political climate like around this issue here in the Netherlands?
I think quite the same, because up until shortly, the Labour Party was also a little bit afraid of this topic. And then when the conversation started about merging with the Greens, then people started to be more open-minded about it. But also we have very extreme right, Trump-like political parties who deny climate change. We have parties who don't deny climate change, but who wants to be very sure that people can still drive their car everywhere for free with no consequences. And also we have an issue with there being no good alternative for the car. So our public transportation system is but it's not very cheap for people who don't make a lot of money. So for me personally, for example, I share a very small car with my best friend, most of the time it's cheaper for me to take my very small car than to take the train. So as long as we don't have cheap public transport that is also very widespread, because I know the Netherlands is a small country, but in rural areas it's very difficult to get around with public transport, people won't stop using their car. So we still have a lot of issues, I think.
Ali, I want to ask you about the way that you would, picking up on the point that Mikal said before about it is a bit of a political hot issue. Does the PVDR, going into an election campaign, when they're going to talk about investing in renewables, do they do it from the frame of it's going to create more jobs and good paying jobs? Or is it like we're doing it because we want to address the issues related to the climate?
I think we need to take it not from how our narrative, pushing our narrative is very difficult. Of course, we have people talking, just to be clear, the leader of the joint list of GroenLinks, the Green Party, and PvdA is Frans Timmermans. He was the European Commissioner for Environment. He basically is the person who pushed through the European New Green Deal. Mm-hmm. And that is basically like a framework, like a European framework will have also effects on a global level in terms of what is needed, what you need to do in order to have, in order for a government to combat climate change. So there's a whole bunch of measures in that legal, basically legal document that all European countries have to adhere to.
And they've all signed up to it. If you're in the EU.
At this moment, yes. Yep. At this moment, yes. However, if we look at how it's, we were pushed. We're not a majority in the European Parliament. We're not a majority even in the European Commission. And when I say we, as in Green parties and Socialist parties, are not the majority. And I think it's incredible that we've managed to push this through. But now I'm questioning myself, why did that happen? Now our biggest ally is the Christian Democrats across Europe, France and Germany, and they were allies in this journey until today, where they're like, oh, we're not sure. After pushing it through, after agreeing with it, after it becomes law, they're now, oh, I'm not sure. Why? Because it resonates. It doesn't resonate as something they want politically.
Yeah, they're playing both sides of the street.
So they're playing both sides, and I'm like, oh shit, like they really cornered us, didn't they? They really put us in a corner where...
Unless you point out the hypocrisy.
Yeah, but that's the thing is, that's where the narrative comes in. So if we take a step back and be like, okay, well, how is it affecting people's lives? That narrative is going to be toxic. And to the point where it's going to be like, yeah, but, France is the main man of the environment, which we're hoping, in our alliance with the Greens, is going to increase our vote, increase our young voters, and bring over some liberal voters who will be like, you know what, we're talking, we're not just talking the talk, we're actually doing something about it, and we have credentials to say we've done something about it, but now there's a big test on the national level whether that's going to work. We're not talking about green jobs. We're not talking about a positive aspect, because no one's given us the mic to actually say those things. Most of the time it's criticizing the new Green Deal, criticizing the green movement as airy-fairy, isn't able to actually implement it, it's going to cost you more. So the problem is that we're facing is that we can't actually talk about these things, and even when we do, it doesn't actually resonate because it hasn't proven, like installing, you saw all those windmills and everything, the companies behind that, unfortunately, are still the oil companies who basically have implemented the same way of working from oil fields to wind farms. The same way of working. I'm professionally a project manager, and I know that means there is no heart in it. There is no sense of ownership and responsibility towards the environment. It just makes financial sense. And the moment that breaks down, because the government isn't providing subsidies, the European Commission is not providing support for the green industry, it will collapse, and they'll go back to using their money to plow into oil fields in the North Sea. And so basically we're in a tightrope situation where it can collapse any moment, even though the narrative we're pushing out is that's it. Forever we will be on the trajectory of the green movement.
Mikal, you got any thoughts on that?
I agree. I don't think I have anything to add, actually, because Yeah, I think you're quite
You've been
right.
brainwashed. That's why you're.
I think you're quite right.
We've been greenwashed in a different way.
One thing that is happening in Australian politics, and I wonder if it's happening here in the Netherlands as well, is that the Conservative Party in Australia, their voting base, their traditional voting base is ageing. As in they're getting older, and that group is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And the largest group that's now growing is sort of that 18 to 35 group. And they're voting more left. I mean, we don't have 60,000 parties like you do in the Netherlands, spawning new ones every day. But they're either voting for the Labor Party, the majority of that cohort, that younger cohort, vote Labor, and a minority of that vote for the Green Party in the sort of inner city. And so I'm wondering the demographics of the voter in the Netherlands. What's that? What's happening there?
In the last national elections, the Labour Party was the oldest party in terms of voting base.
Wow.
So here it's the other way around.
That's not good.
It's not good, but it's also because the Netherlands is it's an aging country. So we have more old people than young people, to say so. And but now, for the first time, the last local elections, we've seen a shift from old voters to younger voters, and especially now with Frans Timmermans, young people really like him. I think he has some kind of Bernie Sanders effect on them,
Right.
And young people are very happy about him. So I think this time it will be better, and I think it's also because we've worked on putting young people forward from within the Labour Party. So less
As in candidates?
As in candidates.
Exhibit A right here?
Yeah, me, but also, I mean, I'm in the city council, but in the national parliament, there are 2 people who are, no, I think even 3 people who are under 30.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's very important as well. So we're getting into a shift now.
Yeah.
So it's getting better. And especially because we are merging with the Greens, who's a much younger party than the PvdA, it's getting better. Yeah.
Sticking with that, you wrote a beautifully scathing column a number of years ago in which you wrote a letter to the then Prime Minister of the Netherlands. Is it Rutte? Is that his?
Rutte.
Yeah, Rutte.
Yes.
Where, and I forgive me because I actually had to do with the translation. It was written in Dutch and I had to translate it back into English,
okay.
and I don't know if the translation was spot on, but what you were essentially talking about was that his idea of the Netherlands is this sort of almost, I think you were saying it was a bit of a fantasy land. It doesn't actually represent what a modern Netherlands looks like, and you referred to the New Dutch.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to get a sense from you about what do you think a modern Netherlands should look like or does look like compared to what the Conservatives think it looks like.
Well, for me, I think the Conservatives really hold on to cultural rituals, or I don't know, a certain type of ideal in their head that doesn't even exist anymore. So, for example, I have 3 sisters in total. 2 of them are my half-sisters. They are very small, 3 and 5, and their mom is Dutch, as opposed to me. Both my parents are Eritrean. So I think they are a product of the modern Dutch society where people have interracial marriages, interracial families, etc. But for conservative people, that's very special and very almost like they're in a museum sometimes when I walk on the street with my sisters. They're like, what's their ethnicity? And we don't understand. And for me, that's so weird because we are already living it. It's not something that's unrealistic. A certain part of the Netherlands already living in that inclusive society where everyone mingles with everyone, marries with everyone, starts a family, friends, whatever. But for a certain generation maybe or group in the Netherlands, that's still very strange. And I think that's our challenge, to make sure that everyone feels included in the Netherlands. For me, for example, as a politician, I don't care when people are being racist to me. I mean, I won't sleep less about it. Mm-hmm. But what really bothers me is that some people will write to me, who do you think you are, coming here and talking about our culture? And I'm like, I'm born here. I was born and raised here.
Classic.
Like, what are you talking about? It's my culture as well. That is something that we need to get out of our system. because there's a whole generation of young people with migrant backgrounds growing up in the Netherlands who doesn't feel included in society because we keep excluding them. We keep seeing them as outsiders or others, and I think we should really stop that. And it's important that our politics are inclusive and our leadership is inclusive.
Fantastic. Ali, can I broaden out that question somewhat and to talk about it from a European perspective? I mean, obviously, your background is both Syrian and Iraqi. You grew up in London, in the UK. You're now living in the Netherlands to raise a family. What does a modern Europe look like? Because, there's the last 5 or 6 years or last decade for the European Union as an idea has really been tested, right? We've had Brexit. You were telling me the other day about how, Poland and a number of those Eastern countries was thinking about making a move as well. What does a modern Europe look like? Where is Europe going?
So, for me, I take inspiration from there's a book by Stephen Zweig. It's called The World of Yesterday, and it describes the 1920s, just before the 20s, 30s, just before the start of World War II, kind of in between the two wars, and the concept of this cosmopolitan Europe, and he particularly showcases Vienna as all the Balkan countries, the Northern Europeans, Southern Europe, all mixing together under just before I think it was pre-World War I, or in any case, Vienna being a cosmopolitan area where all nations of the Austro-Hungarian and outside the Austro-Hungarian Empire were mixing and intermixing. He sees that as a positive aspect of humanity, a kind of progressive aspect of where Europe is heading towards, and he contrasts that with another figure who
also Austrian.
Austrian, and of course he saw it completely differently. Hitler saw that as an abomination, and is the very reason for the decadence of Europe, and wanted to have a solution for that. So I feel like we haven't fully evolved from those two aspects. In Europe, I think globally as well.
Yeah.
Where its identity goes downwards towards nationality, nationalism, and then individualism, and then you kind of like just protect your family, fuck everyone else. Sorry.
Yeah. Against run.
Yeah. Or you go. Whereas the way I see it is that you go upwards, and if I go upwards all the way to the end, and use science fiction, I would say like a Star Trek ideal for federation, Earth's federation, or basically the federation where we live in a world where we're so over it that by force because you're interacting with not just other humanoids but other species, and you have to find an identity where it's beyond yourself. If I take that as like the end of it, or the highest level, and I move backwards, that's where I see there's a role for a pan-European identity. Pan-European identity based on values.
Yeah.
Not based on nationality, not based on just historical facts, not based on policies or economics or social policy, but based on values. Where in the world do European values, as defined by the European Union at the moment, do you find that? That's the nation I want to be part of. That's the nation I want to advocate for. So I think the opportunity I've had, the privilege of moving to the Netherlands, is being able to actually identify as that much more than the past. When I was in the UK, I really tried really hard to be as English as possible so that everyone else around me can accept me and push. Anyone who denies that is like, oh, you're racist, or you don't like me for why. But then even that I found very restrictive, very unfreeing, very, being boxed into. Whereas when I'm here, I feel comfortable saying, yeah, I live in the Netherlands, and when I get my nationality, I'm comfortable saying I advocate for the values that intersect, silver lining through society. That also relates to my politics. I'm a socialist. I'm an internationalist socialist, meaning that I want, if any worker or any person out there is struggling, that's my struggle. And I think that has been diminished and is continuing under attack, even on the left. We have a leftist party that, not nationalist as such, but it's anti-European leftist party also in the Netherlands.
Yeah, right.
And that to me is just an oxymoron. Like, how can that even come together?
I mean, Jeremy Corbyn basically was that person when he was leader of the Labor Party, and so he was essentially a Stalinist. Okay, last two questions to you, Mikal. First of all, I just want to get a sense of what does your world look like in the next 6 weeks? You're running for the national elections. Like, just give us a bit of a bird's eye view of what's going on in your world right now, campaign wise.
Well, I have a lot of interviews, podcasts, stuff like this, and also doing a lot of debates. Panel discussions. You get invited to next week. I'm getting interviewed by children, which is also very funny about the elections. So all types of that. And whenever I have the time, I have to write my thesis. So that's life right now. So my thesis deadline is 1 week for the elections.
Timing of that
is very
just
intense. Yeah.
Radio.
So I won't see my family. I won't see my friends until December, I think.
Yeah, right.
But that's okay. They all support me, so that's very nice.
I'm very confident that if anyone could do it, you can.
Oh, thank you.
Because you have a track record.
Yeah, thank you.
But I hope it doesn't come at the expense of your own health or your own.
No, it doesn't.
Your own mental health, because that
I think it's important. Yeah, I think that's important, and I really try to do that as well. So yeah, thank you for that.
Ali, just one more question for you as well. Obviously, you've started your own podcast as well. What was the motivating factor to do such a thing?
So I spent 2 years in the Paving That Academy, which is kind of like a leadership program. We would come together as a group of about 20, 30 people, mainly young activists. Every month we would try to educate each other on themes of environment, governance, European Union, all these other. So we can have a good level playing field of understanding between us. That is about 2 years the second year of that. What we realized is at some point, including Mikal, like now that she's on the national list, she's getting exposed to the media and podcasting and talking and expressing herself. And it's a really steep learning curve where you go from completely unknown to suddenly you're on national or regional. Everyone wants to hear who you are. And that actually happened to our second on the list, to Esma, where Esma Lala,
yes.
Sorry, she's second on our list, and then suddenly the media woke up to, hey, we don't even know this person. And then we're like, yeah, because you should have paid attention. But the point is, I wanted to start a podcast for two reasons. One, I want to help bring out the stories, the hard work. Anyone who goes out there and says, well, what's Labour doing? What are the Social Democrats doing for us? It seems like we're doing nothing because we're not in national government. But on a local level, on a campaigning level, people are working hard. We still have one of the strongest activist bases, and we have one of the biggest membership list.
Of all the parties.
Of all the parties in the Netherlands.
Yeah.
And that, for me, it was important to bring those voices, bring those stories forwards. And the other part is giving back to those people and saying, how, making them more comfortable with expressing their story, their narrative, giving them that media training as such, to be able to go out there and say, look, this is what I believe, this is what I'm doing, and this is where I want to go with it. And hopefully their stories will inspire other people to become active in politics generally, and in the Labour Party specifically, or the Green Party, or the progressives generally.
Fantastic, very good. Folks, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I really appreciate you both taking time out of your busy schedules, in particular you. I mean, you've got
thank you for having me.
You've got a lot going on. So can I say to you, good luck with the election campaign. I really hope you, enjoy the whole Festival of Democracy, but also that you get over the line on the 22nd of November, and also that the PVDR gets elected into some form of government.
Yeah, that would be nice.
It would be fantastic. So good luck.
Thank you.
Ali, do you want to give the podcast a plug before we wrap up?
Yeah, so we'll be forging links. This episode will be one of the ones we will be launching with. So we're going to hopefully sometime in October, we're going to be launching it. And then we're going to hopefully consecutively be producing episodes for that. So be Forging Links will be the podcast. And if you want to find us on Twitter, X, or any of the other social media, we are a union. So that's the platform we're trying to build where we can promote activists on. So it's aunion.eu.
Great, and we'll put the links in our in the bio of this week's episode. Thanks for coming on the show today, and thank you for welcoming me to your wonderful country once again.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for listening to Socially Democratic. Did you like the podcast? hit the follow or subscribe button and be sure to leave a review on Apple Podcast or Podchaser. And to get all the latest on Socially Democratic, follow Dunn Street on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter and LinkedIn. And we'll see you next Friday. Socially Democratic was brought to you by Maurice Blackburn Lawyers. Maurice Blackburn Lawyers have spent more than a century paving the hard path to justice for everyday Australians. They've helped over 500,000 Australians turn their situation around, and they know how the system works. Their experience and skills means you'll get the best results possible. Find out more on their website, mauriceblackburn.com.au. Maurice Blackburn, experience you can count on. Socially Democratic was brought to you by SwiftFox. Every moment on a campaign matters. You need the tools that you can trust, lists that are up to date, phone banks that can change minds, emails that drive donations, events that will energise the community online and offline, and text blasts that distill your message perfectly. SwiftFox CRM is made for campaigners by campaigners. To find out more, go to swiftfoxcrm.com to win your next campaign.